Hey, today I'm going to show you a quick way to glue together this large plywood panel using this veneer press. Stick around. Hey, this is Todd Wolf of Made by Wolf, and today I got a client that needs a plywood panel that is 1 1/4 inches thick by 20 inches by 24 inches. What are some different ways that we could actually glue that together? I've got two 5/8 inch pieces of Baltic birch that I need to glue together. And so how do you go about that? The biggest issue is how do you get good pressure in the middle of that panel? Well, one way to do that would be to take 1-inch screws and to actually screw together in the middle of the panel with 1-inch screws. Of course, the problem with that is then you have screws in that panel. I could possibly do that with this panel because this is going to be about 5 inches off the ground and I'm only going to see the top side. So that would be one way to do that. Another way to do that would be to clamp it together. Now I happen to have clamps that are about 7 inches deep here, and so I could theoretically put several of these clamps there and then smaller clamps around the edges, and that would be one way to glue this together. So you got your smaller clamps around the edges, you got your deeper clamps into the middle, and then you would just have to make sure you had enough clamps to go all the way around with that. That's a very valid way to get that together. But what do you do if you had a 36 by 36 inch panel? All of a sudden it'd be very hard to get that clamp pressure in the middle of that panel. So one more thing that could possibly happen in terms of clamping would be to use some cauls. Now, I have a bunch of these made up. I've made them years ago for a project, and I've just kept them around and they've been good. And they've got two sides. You may not be able to see it, but one side is flat and the other side has a gentle bow on it. So these are the two flat sides. You can see if I put those together, there's no gap there. But if I flip these around, they have, all of a sudden you can see that there is a bow to each one of these, and that allows you to get pressure in the middle of a panel by putting one there and one there and then clamping on the outside edges, and then that puts pressure in the middle of the panel. But again, these cauls are about 30 inches long. Actually, they're not even that. They're probably about 26 inches long. I used them for a project that was 24 inches wide. And so what do you do with that? You would need a 36-inch caul, and all of a sudden it becomes fairly arduous to actually do that. So let me show you what I've been doing for years to glue together large plywood panels. And that's to use this guy right over here, which is my vacuum press. The heart of this vacuum press is a vacuum motor by Vacuum Pressing Systems. I will put their information in the description. They have excellent tools. They actually have several grades of tools, everything from professional pumps to things that are less expensive for someone who's not going to be vacuum pressing all that much. With vacuum pressure, we can actually get significant amounts of pressure, plenty enough for veneering or for holding these two pieces of plywood together while the glue dries, so that we can glue together large panels, or that we can get even pressure when we're putting veneer onto plywood or veneer onto regular wood. It works extremely well. I always make sure that I put something underneath it paper-wise. I have a bunch of newspaper here. I also have a paper roll, and I'll just rip off a piece of one of the paper roll. So I'll place that there, and I'll place one of my panels. So while I'm spreading the glue, let's talk a little bit about what exactly the vacuum pressure does. When the vacuum pump sucks the air out from inside of the vacuum press, what happens is that the atmospheric pressure, which is about 14.7 pounds per square inch, takes over and forces those two pieces of plywood together. Now that ends up being, with the level of vacuum that we get from this vacuum pump, being about 1,800 pounds per square inch. That is a lot of pressure, and it's evenly distributed. But as people have explained this to me in the past, I still have a hard time wrapping my mind around exactly how the air pressure, the atmospheric pressure, is pushing those two pieces of wood together. Well, look at it this way. Imagine if you were to dive to the deepest part of the ocean. The weight of all of that water above you would absolutely crush you. And the same thing is happening here. We live in an ocean of air, and there is a lot of pressure that air exerts. We just don't notice it most of the time because we are in an equilibrium with the air around us. What happens when you take something, put it inside of a bag, and then suck the air out of it is the inside of that bag is all of a sudden not at equilibrium anymore with the outside. And so it is having pressure pushed on it from actually all directions, and it is that pressure that is holding those two pieces of wood together, not necessarily the vacuum that you've sucked out. If we were in outer space and we put those two pieces of wood together, put it in a bag, and created a perfect vacuum, there really wouldn't be anything holding those two things together. But we're not in outer space. We're on planet Earth, and the atmospheric pressure holding those two boards together does actually a better job than we could do most of the time with our clamps and other ways that we have to hold pieces of wood together while the glue is drying. And that is that. That piece is glued up, and I need to leave it in for, I will probably leave this in for about 2 hours today, and then I'll take it out and I'll be able to work with it at that point. And it was, in the end, a very simple thing to do, and it is a very simple thing to do with a veneer press. All right, it has been 2 hours, and I am ready to take this sucker out of here, and that is simple as turning off the pump. I'm doing all of my clamps on the side there. And we're done. So I can then take this over to the panel saw and I can start to process it, cut it down to size, do the sanding I need to do on it. This is ready to go, and this is the easiest way that I have found. I would not be without this guy. I hope this has gotten your brain kind of churning about a different way, maybe a new way you hadn't thought about for gluing up larger pieces of wood, larger panels. And it is an excellent way to get into veneering. If you haven't started veneering yet, it adds a whole new dimension to what you can do with woodworking. And so I encourage you to think about that. This is Todd Wolf with Made by Wolf, encouraging you to get out in your space, learn something new, and make something today.